Hey,
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 how's it going?
can you hear me? Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for doing this. This is so cool.
Nope, no problem, man. I've been on a couple this week, so it's exciting to get to
No,
talk
yeah,
to some
that's
people.
awesome. No, yeah, it's
Mhm.
preparing you for when you hit the big stage and the media obligations will be crazy, right?
For sure.
Yes. Sorry about yesterday too. Like, I
No
was
worries, man.
I was not feeling good at all. So yeah. So it was pretty cool. Like I saw you followed me on Instagram and I checked out your profile and stuff, and I was like, this is awesome. And I was like, I want to interview this guy. So yeah, thank you for coming on again. So do you want to kind of talk about your background a little bit and how you got
Yeah.
into wrestling and maybe even your kind of decision to go to NIU, which is an awesome school?
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. My dad wrestled. I played all
Mhm.
sorts of sports growing up until high school. I didn't really get into any sports like I did with wrestling, though. I played
Mhm.
football, I played soccer, but I really liked the individual aspect of wrestling.
Yeah.
I didn't like football that much because I didn't feel like I could do enough. Like you'd get a tackle and you feel like it wasn't done, or you're only
Mhm.
playing half the game, and you'd lose and it'd be somebody's fault. You'd win, it'd be somebody else's like credit.
Yeah.
So I really liked wrestling because when I lost, it was all on me. When I won, it was all on me,
Yeah.
and I think that individual aspect was huge for me. But I played soccer my freshman year of high school,
Okay.
and then wrestled the following season. And after that, I was like, I'm just wrestling from here on out.
It's awesome.
And was already knew I wanted to wrestle in college.
Mhm.
But when I was getting recruited, I got recruited by a decent amount of places. I was a fairly marketable wrestler coming out of Illinois
Mhm.
with an undefeated state title, 3 state finals
Yeah.
appearances, a couple All-American medals, and not terrible grades. So I got, like offers from like Mizzou and
It's
a
awesome.
bunch of other places. Ultimately, I think I really kind of wanted to stay close to home and go Division One,
Mhm.
and NIU was a really good opportunity for that. 45 minutes from where I grew up.
Oh, that's it.
So yeah, so it was really nice being close to home. So that was a big deciding factor. It's funny though, it's like when I was in 8th grade, my teacher had us fill out where I'm going to be when I graduate from high school questionnaire.
Mhm.
And I had put that I was going to wrestle at either NIU or the University of Illinois. And I didn't even recall doing that. And I read it when I graduated. It was kind of like very self-fulfilling that I had picked that out when I was
Yeah.
in 8th grade.
That's awesome. Have
Yeah.
you always kind of been an NIU fan growing up?
We would go, that was where sectionals for basketball was held, like
Oh,
super
okay.
sectionals, I think. So I had been a few times. I'd never been to any like football games, but
Mhm.
I knew a couple guys who had wrestled there that I was fans of watching them wrestle in high school.
That's
So
awesome.
I don't know if I ever really thought about it though,
Mhm. Yeah.
but I really enjoyed the school. I enjoyed my visit, and I had a couple people that I knew from high school wrestling that had gone there. So it was a pretty easy decision, I think.
Yeah, I remember like when I was first like NIU. Do you remember Jordan Lynch? He's the quarter.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's when they played like Florida State and stuff. That's when I kind of got like that's when NIU kind of hit the map. I feel like
Yeah.
football wise, that's where I like finally recognized it, which is really cool. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's
That was
awesome.
my freshman year of college, was
Hmm.
when they played Florida State and we're in the Orange Bowl.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
I looked that up because I was wondering like it might have been like the
Hmm.
same time that you were there. That's awesome. He was like a senior,
Hmm.
I think, when you was it your first
Yeah.
year there?
Yep. Yeah. My first year there. And then I was there as well when he came back and coached for a season too.
Mhm.
So yeah, good dude, really,
Awesome.
really talented quarterback in college. But yeah, it's cool to get that notoriety for being such a small Division One. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a school right in the center of a cornfield. Like you look out of the dorm windows and all you see is corn all
For
around you.
real?
So yeah,
Wow.
from most of the spots in a dorm window, you look out and see corn.
Wow, yeah. That's kind of how have you I don't know if you've ever been to like Washington State University, but in Pullman,
Hmm.
Washington, it's basically like that. Like it just plains for days, then all of a sudden it's
Hmm.
a random city. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah. So when you were kind of going through high school, and obviously you're like a well accomplished wrestler going in, and then wrestling in college, was MMA like ever on your mind? Like were you ever aware that you could maybe make a career out of it?
I definitely wanted to do it. So I had my first fight when I was 16.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I did a pancrase fight, which is like MMA. You just can't hit in the face.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like, I was sitting out for some reason. Like I had I had just gotten like my cauliflower ear drained, you know, and there was nothing I could do in practice. And my coach, who had just bought our club out, was like, well, why don't you come to our like kickboxing class and like learn how to hit the bag? And I went for a day to that. And he was like, why don't you just take a fight? And I was like, okay, you know, like it's not a big deal. Like I'm not going to get hit in the face or anything. Ran it by my mom. Hard no.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard no. That got denied really quick. And I don't remember what I did, but I did my dad a favor. I can't remember what favor I did him, but I was like, the cost of this favor is that you sign the waiver and then I get to go fight and you don't tell mom till like the week before, you know?
Wow.
So we pulled a fast one on her and she found out like 2 weeks that I was actually going to go fight, and fought, won, loved it. She hated it. She said never again. And I don't know that I ever thought, oh, this could be a career. At the time, MMA wasn't as like big as it is now. So maybe it was something I wanted to try for real. But, you know, the more I thought about what I wanted to do with my life, the more I realized I didn't really know. And I got to the point where I was finishing my master's degree and I was like, I have no idea what I want to do with this. Like I'm halfway done with my master's. I don't want to work in an office. I like coaching wrestling, but I was doing all this work coaching these guys where like I was wrestling like 4 or 5 hours out of the day with you know, Division I wrestlers. I was in like some of the best shape I'd ever been in. I was like, it's stupid that I'm doing all this work and not competing. So I just took a fight and really started to fall in love with it. And was like, you know what? Like I'm young. I have a fallback plan if this doesn't work out. So I'm going to give it a shot. And I went and kept taking fights. I fought 5 times in 6 months. And and I got to fight in Mexico and just get to see some really cool things where, you know, I never thought I was a part of Mexico I wouldn't have experienced had I not been fighting. And that was when I was like, I want to do this for sure. Like if this can take me to places like this and see things like this, that's what I want to do. If all I get out of the experience is I get to, you know, see the world and see some cool things, that's fine by me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's wild how fast the sport's grown because you're still so young. And then, but some of these guys, it wasn't even like on their mind to fight. You know what I mean? But now it's like everyone wants to get to the UFC or fight in Bellator or something like that for sure. So when you finally racked up a few amateur wins, what kind of, I read a little bit, like there's a really good article done on you. I forget who did it, but do you want to go through your story of how you finally chose MMA Lab as where you wanted to train?
So I got a call from an agent and a manager, Lance Spod, the guy who manages me now. And I'd been working with him for like the last like year or so, but they just signed me because they had to wait till I took my pro debut. But just like by weird happenstance, I like kind of knew this guy who had grew up wrestling in the same area of me in Rockford, Illinois. And he's a really smart dude, wrestled in college and then went pre-law, and he got the legal internship at the UFC, which is like a pretty big deal. It was a really good internship. And they don't pay you anything. So well, they pay you, but like not a lot. So he was in Vegas doing this internship and living with Lance, who is now my manager. And he had asked him, like, do you know any like local guys from back home that are like college wrestlers or good wrestlers that are fighting now? And he brought me up. And I got a call from him. Yeah, just like, you know, the stars aligning. Yeah. And he was like, you know, we'd like to see you at one of the gyms we work with. And he gave me some options. And the MMA Lab was on that list. And my roommate from college moved to Phoenix with his his girlfriend, and then they broke up. And you needed a roommate. And I was like, well, I can be down there in like this, like a month or two before I finished my master's degree. I was like, I finished my master's degree. I'm out the next weekend. And I visited for a week just to try the gym out. You know, I went down, it was like late April, right after I had fought my last fight, and tried the gym out and knew within like 2-3 days, I was like, this is where I want to be. I like the people here. Coach Crouch was awesome. It was such a welcoming environment. And we went that week and signed a lease for an apartment. And that was it. I went back home. I didn't go to graduation. I stuck around to meet my nephew who had just been born, and put a U-Haul behind my Impala and drove it like 1,500 miles across the country.
Yeah, that's a long trek.
It is a long trek. It was like 20, how many hours? 26, 27 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah. And stayed the night in Oklahoma with one of my old teammates, and got to Phoenix and basically started training like a week later after I had settled in and everything, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. So was there any other candidates, or were you kind of just like sold after you took that, like kids to visit? You just like,
Yeah. Nobody that I took seriously. Like
yeah.
I thought about like Rufus Sport,
Mhm.
and I thought about like Factory X Muay Thai in Denver, where like Anthony Smith is at with Coach Mark Montoya.
Okay.
They're all places that my management team works with. And yeah, I took the visit to the MMA Lab, and I was like, I don't really see a reason to go anywhere else. They're such a good gym. And
worry, and just lost my headphones.
No, you're
Just
good. You're
died.
good. It's okay. Those are sweet though. That's like a little mic in there.
Mhm.
That's cool. Those headphones, they're like, there's like a mic and stuff. That's sick.
Yeah.
Sounds really good.
I've been on planes all day, so they just died. But now I can
No, it's okay.
barely hear you. Hold up.
No, it's okay.
Is there a way to like turn speaker on? There we go.
Awesome. Yeah.
There, that's right. All right, cool. But yeah, what my biggest worry was that I was gonna go to like a factory gym and like get lost in the system, which was my same like worry when I was getting recruited for college too, which is partly why I decided against Mizzou, because Mizzou had like 45 guys on their roster. It was like there's 10.
How many?
Yeah.
What's a typical roster size for like a Division I wrestling squad?
Oh, about 30. About
Okay.
30.
Okay.
Yeah. So they had. I think theirs was actually close to like 50, almost 50 guys
Oh
on the
my
roster.
gosh.
Yeah, they were a huge team and filled with good wrestlers. And like, I didn't want to get there and not see mat time until I was a junior. I was like, I could be taking those tough matches and wrestling in the big tournaments earlier, which, maybe my practice partners aren't quite as good, but that was like a risk I was willing to take. I came from a small school where I didn't really have practice partners anyway, so it wasn't a big change to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of that same thinking going behind choosing the MMA Lab, because when I went there, it was super obvious that like whether you were an amateur who just got invited to pro practice, or you were Jared Cannonier or Benson Henderson, you were, if you asked for the attention, if you worked hard, you were going to get the attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I worried that if I went to like Rufus Sport, and that's not to say that's how it is there, because I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was a concern of mine, and I knew for sure that wasn't going to happen to me at the lab. So that was a big factor in me choosing them.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like mixed martial arts and like MMA, because how like in the NFL, when you're in the NFL, you're kind of like in MLB and stuff. Those kind of guys are isolated, but you have like MMA is so unique in the fact that you can, once you join a gym, you have accessibility to like some of the best guys in the world. So can you kind of like touch on your experiences maybe, and like how cool it's been to kind of just like immerse yourself into a gym, and like, I don't know, because I feel like it's just so cool how you can get world-class advice.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, you actually like easily, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the cool things that was about the lab, was like Tuesday nights, Benson Henderson is coaching no-gi class for anybody. Anybody can show up and go to that, the member of the gym, and you get to work with Benson.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got there, we were going to, sparring sessions and live wrestling, stuff like that. Not so much live wrestling. I was pretty confident there, but any live sparring or any of the striking days, I was super nervous to like, go pick somebody really big or really good to go and work with, because I was like embarrassed, because I was, I'm still not the greatest striker in the world. And at the time I, really didn't know what I was doing. And right away was like, all right, you Illinois, like I always wore Illinois shirts, and Benson go, you Illinois, come here. And I'm rolling with Benson all of a sudden. And it wasn't long before Benson wanted to wrestle with me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was how it worked, man. Like if you've got something to bring to the table, nobody has a problem working with you on the stuff that you're bad at. It's like, oh, you wrestle with me, I'll hold mitts for you. It's like a really give and take, like very even. There's is super non-egotistical type of environment.
That's awesome.
Where, you can work with everybody. And within the first month, I had rounds with Benson, I had rounds with Jared, and James Nakashima, who's fighting for a one championship title. Tankino, I'd done jiu-jitsu with Tankino Mendez, the ADCC world champ. So, it was pretty mind-blowing that I was getting to roll with the talent I was. And I felt like I was on that level with them in the wrestling world, which I think I am.
No, yeah, for sure.
I'll say this, of like, even the dudes who I'm better wrestlers than are like, their work ethic is just so crazy. They're still professional athletes,
right?
Whether they're in a discipline that they're not the best at, or they're in their best discipline, they're still professional athletes and they work like it. And that's really how you get good, is having that type of cultured attitude in practice. And nobody brings that better than Benson Henderson. I mean, Benson drills a wrestling drill harder than any Division I wrestler, any international wrestler that I've ever drilled with. Benson can make me crawl off the mat worse than any of those guys. And I've wrestled with a lot of the top guys in Division I and beyond, even, where I never thought Benson, when you watch him fight, it's like, oh, well, why wouldn't you think that? But he has, on multiple occasions when we break for water, I was like, I don't know if I can go back in there.
Yeah.
He's an insanely high-paced wrestler, high-paced grappler, high-paced striker. Just it puts that pace on you, and that's what he brings to practice, So, I mean, as far as getting to roll with guys like that, I don't think you can really replace it, which is kind of contradictory from what I was saying about picking my college out, that I didn't really care. You can bring that culture yourself, but it's a realm where you don't know what you're doing, or like, I didn't know how to strike. I think that's important to have.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Would you say that with your like extensive wrestling background, was it pretty easy to transition into doing jiu-jitsu and stuff?
Jiu-jitsu, for sure. The biggest thing that hurt me in jiu-jitsu right away was jiu-jitsu isn't wrestling.
Right.
Your wrestling helps you like leaps and bounds. Like, the funny thing, I was walking around the gym with a white belt for a while. And,
yeah.
And, I'd walk into, a public class, like a regular class, not pro practice. And some other white belt would walk up to me, and I'd forget that they're like a CPA or something. And they have to work in the morning and like have a regular life. Mm-hmm. And Coach Crouch would, hey, why don't you go a little easier?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize. He's like, if you slow down, you're going to learn it better too. And I think that was a big step for me, was like throttling back a little bit in jiu-jitsu, where it's a little bit more, not that wrestling isn't a chess match, but it's a little bit more of a chess match in jiu-jitsu, because those little positions, you really have to feel them out. And if you don't take the time to slow down and feel them out, it's really hard to master it. And that's why they call it like the gentle art, is because you're supposed to learn it slow. And wrestling is not like that at all. You're wrestling, you start some things slow, but it's meant to be done really hard and really fast. And there isn't a ton in jiu-jitsu that is done exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're finishing a choke, you're finishing a submission or whatever, 110% squeeze, but it's not all about squeeze. It's more about leverage and positioning, whereas wrestling is more about just pushing your technique through. There's like two philosophies in wrestling. You can you could be a thief, two types of thief, either the thief who cracks the window and crawls through, or the thief who just kicks the door down. And I was very much so the thief who just kicked the front door down in wrestling matches. I didn't crawl through any windows. Mm-hmm. I wasn't, I was just a in your face forward competitor. And that doesn't seem to apply to jiu-jitsu quite as well. But
so was that kind of a transition, becoming more patient?
Yeah, becoming more patient for sure. And I as my career progressed in college as well, I became more of a patient wrestler. Where I'd force in my younger years college wrestling, I'd force things and lose them. And I think that comes with just growth and maturity in the sport in general, especially. But that's something you can get very far in college wrestling doing that and still making those mistakes. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, like that, you have to start with that level of maturity almost, where guys who wrestle, I think, struggle a little bit more, but there's still nothing to compare of a lifetime of smashing people, like it's very hard to mimic that. And I like this conversation, like the wrestling and jiu-jitsu contrast. And it's one that I like to have a lot, especially with jiu-jitsu guys, or especially with guys who just wrestle, because there is a difference. And one of the differences that I like to point out, that I think about anyway, is like, nobody starts wrestling when they're 25 and becomes a world-class wrestler. But there are plenty of people who start jiu-jitsu when they're 25, 30, and they become very proficient black belts. And I think that is a testament to the brutality of wrestling that doesn't exist quite the same in jiu-jitsu.
110%.
Yeah.
I agree. So like, would you say, okay, this is one of the main questions I wanted to ask you. So like, what's it like kind of knowing, in the back of your head that you are so skilled in probably one of the most important, like aspects of MMA? Like how, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a huge confidence booster.
Yeah.
I know I always have that to fall back on. You can be a subpar striker and a great wrestler and go very far. It's a lot harder to be a great striker and a subpar wrestler, whereas the wrestling nullifies a lot of things. So I don't want to be the fighter who always looks like he's just in a wrestling match. Sometimes that's the way it is, but it does give you a sense of security. It gave me, like, I bounced for a while. Like I don't know too many football players or wrestlers didn't like bounce for a little bit in college. And like, I never hit anybody while I was bouncing. It was all double legs, all body locks. I didn't want to hit anybody. I didn't know how. It's like, it's kind of like walking around feeling like you have a gun, And I don't know, like, if you've ever walked around with a gun, but walking around with a gun makes you anti-confrontation. And that's kind of how wrestling is. Like, I don't really care to get in confrontations because they don't jack me up, whereas like against like an actual skilled fighter, it raises my heart rate, gets the adrenaline going. But I don't care to be in any real confrontation because it doesn't feel like there's as big of an element of danger as there should be. And I think that's what's important for anybody who learns martial arts, is to understand that. It's like walking around with a loaded gun, and it humbles your spirit to know that you're safe in that way, or I don't like to pick fights. And that's kind of like the same thing in fighting, is it like humbles my spirit a lot, where like, I don't like to shit talk. I don't do that, but knowing that I always have that to fall back on, that if I run into that high noon situation where my back's against the cage and I can be the better wrestler, it's super comforting. But obviously, like, there's always a bigger fish, and you're going to run into a dude who can wrestle too, or you're going to run into, somebody who maybe they're not the best wrestler. They just have good MMA wrestling defense, because there's still a difference when you can get hit. But, wrestling's king. Wrestling is king in MMA.
For sure.
And,
100%.
Yeah.
You would rank it number one, right? Because I was going to ask you, like, what would you rank the main skills? Would you go like wrestling, obviously number one, and then would you put like kickboxing at 2?
Yeah, I'd put, or Muay Thai at 2.
Muay Thai.
It depends on like, traditional Muay Thai guys are like slow starters, but some discipline of striking. I wouldn't say boxing necessarily, but kickboxing, Muay Thai for sure. Unless you're a jiu-jitsu guy who has really good takedowns, that's the other one. Like, you can't be a jiu-jitsu guy with bad takedowns. You can't have your strongest discipline be on the ground and then not be able to take the fight there, So I would definitely put wrestling first, and you can break it down farther than that too. Whereas we say wrestling, okay, well, like, what wrestling?
Yeah.
I would put Greco number 1, Greco or folk style number 1. I'd put freestyle 2. You use so much Greco and fighting on your feet. It's the unsung hero of the wrestling world in a fist fight.
Okay.
If you look at some Greco matches, there are points where it looks like they're fist fighting almost. They're head clubbing each other super hard. They're meeting in the middle with their chests. It really helps you develop your hand fighting. Body locks are super important against the cage. So like from the feet, I'd say Greco. From the ground standpoint, I'd say folk style. That's where you learn how to control people. Because Greco and freestyle aren't about control. They're about scoring and exposing your opponent. You don't have to have control to score in Greco. I can throw my opponent and they roll across their back. All I did is expose them. I don't have control. They scored. Folk style is 100% about control. It's about who can control their opponent the most and force their will upon their opponent. And I think that's the other most important aspect. And I think that's what sets freestyle back from Greco and folk style.
How are you kind of divvying up your training? Because like, how hard is it knowing that, because you said you need to improve as a striker, but like knowing that you're so good at wrestling, how do you kind of balance it out, making sure you're still staying sharp with wrestling and like grappling and jiu-jitsu, but also making leaps in your striking game?
Yeah, if I do an extra wrestling workout, it's not for me. I'm going in for somebody else, a striker who's not as good at wrestling. Any extra workouts I do outside of our regular practice, they're always striking. I get to work with some really good strikers, like one-on-one. Kyle Stewart, he was in the UFC for 2 fights. I think he's going to be back in the UFC soon. He was just fought in the LFA and showcased some of the wrestling that him and I had been working on. Like I had never thought I'd see the day where Kyle was going to go in and just manhandle somebody from a wrestling standpoint, and he did. But he works on me with my striking a lot, and it's been helping a ton. You have to stay sharp with everything. That's what I think intrigues me the most about MMA, and what I liked about going from folk style to freestyle to Greco throughout the season. It just like mitigates burnout. By the time folk style was over, I was super excited about wrestling Greco and super excited about wrestling freestyle. By the time that was over, I was ready to wrestle folk style again. You don't get that burnout in MMA because I'm doing kickboxing one day, I'm doing jiu-jitsu the next, I'm doing wrestling the next. I have to get my strength and conditioning in. It's always something new, and it keeps you on your toes. You can't ever just decide, I'm just going to train this, and I'm not too concerned about my wrestling not being sharp. Because, and the thing is, like, I've been to gyms where there aren't that many good wrestlers, but since I've been at the lab, and not that we didn't have good wrestlers before I got there, we totally did. But we've gotten even more wrestle heavy. We've added more good wrestlers. And we already had probably like 6 Division I wrestlers in the room, 3 of which were at my weight. So it's like, I'm still wrestling Division I wrestlers every time I go into the practice room. So it's like, I thought there was a chance that I was going to get a little worse at wrestling, and I was wrong. I've gotten better at wrestling. I think, like, I'm wrestling with Mark Martin, who was a 3-time NCAA qualifier at Ohio State. James Nakashima was round of 12 from Nebraska. T. Edwards wrestled for Arizona State and ODU. Mike Hamill wrestled at Wyoming. Diego Bencomo wrestled at Duke. Bryce Meredith is there now. He wrestled at Wyoming as well. Was a 2-time NCAA finalist. So, like, I got all the talent I could possibly want in practice partners for a wrestling room. I have borderline better talent to work with than I did in college. You could arguably say that. So I think I'm sharp there. But, yeah, my big concern right now is definitely just polishing out my striking, getting a little more going. And it's like you want to run, but sometimes you got to crawl. And that's what I've really been trying to do, is crawl into my striking. I spent about a year and a half, not focused solely on it, but making it more of the main part of my training. I definitely need to get more in, but I'll always say that, like, there's always more I could be doing, I feel like.
100%. Yeah. It's definitely, I think, because all these wrestlers are seeing so much success, especially at like the welterweight division, more and more guys probably are just going to start entering. So it's only become more and more prevalent for sure. But yeah, so who would you say has probably been served as the biggest role model for you at MMA Lab? Because it seems like you've had so many guys make a tremendous like impact on your career.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would say probably Jared. Jared's an incredible worker and just a phenomenal athlete. And I helped him a lot with his wrestling, and he helps me a lot with my striking. But seeing Jared work is really, really impressive, and taking his advice, being more of a vet, he's had a lot of UFC fights. He's had a lot of fights. He taught me a little bit more to listen to my body and see the way he carries himself in the gym, and that he's just the nicest guy in the world. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to pick one with the guys I've had to look up to and had as training partners. Now I'd throw Jared on that list. I'd throw Kyle Stewart on that list. James Nakashima I'd throw on that list. And these are just guys that I work with too. I mean, I guess the biggest role model would be Benson for sure.
Yeah.
He's like unbreakable, man. I remember the first time I watched Benson. I can't remember if he was training for Chandler or who we fought before Chandler, but we were doing our cage rounds and he had 3 rounds. Now, normally, like if it's a wrestling day where one guy's so the way we do the rounds is one guy goes in, the guy who's fighting, he gets 3 opponents, usually 3 opponents, right? And in wrestling, when that would happen, it's like everybody's vying to be the guy who gets to go last because you're going to get the tired version of the person that you're competing with, which makes a lot of sense. And that wasn't what happened when Benson went in. Everybody wanted to go first. And I thought that was interesting, and I didn't get why. And after the first round, I understood because Benson was screaming and jumping up and down in between the round. And I was like, oh, it's because he's just getting started after the first. Like he's just getting going. And
that's crazy.
And like he's all the way turned on now. Everybody wanted to go first because that was where you were going to take the smallest ass whooping, was if you were the first guy that went in with Benson. And the more he got jacked up, the more tired he felt he made you, the more tired he felt you made him, the better it was for him. And that was like a big thing for me to watch, where I was like, oh, like he's just different.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me for a long time. I don't think I'll ever forget watching that for the first time and figuring out what type of competitor he was.
Yeah, that's wild. So do you know exactly like what happened with him? Because didn't he leave the UFC on a win? I'm pretty sure he did, and I've always like wondered.
I think he did. I don't know that I can necessarily speak to that. I would assume part of it had to do with sponsorships.
Probably.
With the Reebok deal and whatnot, or maybe he probably just reached the end of his contract and the UFC might not have offered him as much money as Bellator did. Money's still king.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And Bellator is buying guys up. Like they bought Corey Anderson up, even though I'm sure the contract that they offered Corey Anderson at the UFC was probably fairly good, but Bellator probably beat it. So I would guess that it'd be something along those lines. I've never asked him though.
No, yeah. So you kind of touched on this a little bit before, but being like such a accomplished wrestler, like I've said, was it ever kind of hard transitioning to MMA? Like facing guys that are like better in other skill sets, you know what I mean? Because MMA is like different, you know what I mean? Was that ever difficult coming from something that you're really good at to like a different kind of realm?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you sit around and think about your opponent enough, you'll eventually make a monster out of them. And I just prefer to sit around and make a monster out of myself in my head. I think that's the easiest way to go about things. And I fought guys who were pretty talented strikers, and it didn't. I know that wrestling is king, is all it is at the end of the day. Where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to get outstruck, I'm just going to get a takedown if I feel like it. But I have fought some dudes that all my fights before this one were at 185, which is pretty ill-advised. I walk around at on a good day 190. I was
going to ask about that. So
yeah. So this weight drop isn't even that bad for me. But I had some real David and Goliath moments where I was staring at the guy across the cage, just like, oh, this dude is big.
Those 185ers sometimes, like if you don't know what you're watching, you could mistake him for 205ers sometimes.
Yeah, they're very
easy.
And like Jared,
he's jacked.
Yeah,
he's huge.
He's not a super tall guy. He's maybe a little bit taller than me, but I knew I was going to drop to 170 eventually. And the day that I met Jared, I was like, oh, like now is when I should drop to 170. I shouldn't wait at all because this guy exists, and him and I are hardly the same species. He's just so big and athletic that scared the shit out of me. And I was like, okay. And I was like that in wrestling too. Big guys always kind of like, ooh, bad juju about him or whatever. And I thought back about it. And the dude I fought last was like 6'3", 6'4", probably hit the cage at like 205 by the time we fought. I probably weighed 186 pounds on fight, you know?
Wow.
And and those dudes were just massive. And I never felt like anybody was that much stronger than me, you know, like you can't teach wrestling strength. You got to earn it over a lifetime. So I never felt like outmatched power wise, but I think that was the biggest thing, was not necessarily looking at a dude who I had seen knock some people out. It was looking at a dude who looked big and had knocked some people out, rather like, ooh, you know, like a smaller guy, he might catch me and I don't know if he's going to knock me out. But looking at a guy where like, ooh, if I make a mistake and I get hit and I get hit hard, I'm going to get put down. And I don't feel that as much at 170 as I do when I look at a 185er. I would say it's definitely the combination of the two. Like this guy I'm fighting, he's like, you know, like I wouldn't say he's overly large or anything like that. He's a good striker. I've seen him hit some people pretty hard, but something about it makes it less daunting to know that I'm the same size as him.
Right, for sure. Is the weight cut is it not, what's kind of the weight cut like, and what's that whole process kind of like?
So this weight cut hasn't been bad at all. Like mid-July, probably, I figured out I couldn't eat gluten. I'm really allergic to it. I got really sick and cut out gluten, and I was all better.
You figured that out on your own?
Over a week of like horrible trial and error of me. Like my mom wanted to take me to the hospital, and
oh my gosh,
I like refused. It was like, because I was only getting sick at night. I like wake up and I'd be like, fine. Not like fine, I'd be drained from being sick the night before. And then eventually I would just get sick again. And it was like every night. And if I ate late at night, I'd get sick in the morning. I was like, it's something I'm eating for sure. Yeah. And I figured out that was it. But when I cut gluten out, I lost a bunch of weight, like right away. Like I haven't been able to put it back on. I was like,
interesting.
I was walking around closer to 200, and I cut that gluten out, and it was like, and I shot down to like 88. And like in the course of, I actually lost it while I was sick. And I wasn't trying to lose weight, and I lost like 12 pounds. And I was like,
wow.
Yeah, over like 6 weeks, I'd lost like 12 pounds. I was like, something's wrong. I'm not trying to lose weight. And then like halfway through losing that weight, I tried to gain weight because I noticed I was losing it. And then that was when I started getting sick. And, so this weight cut's been super easy. That's good. With my diet I'm on. I'm looking forward to actually getting bigger after this fight, having a little time to put some more muscle back on and get closer to that like 90, 95, 200 mark again, where I feel a little bit stronger. I still definitely think I'm going to be stronger than anybody I'm in against in the next, year or so, whatever. But, it's very different from cutting weight in wrestling. Wrestling.
Yeah, I was going to ask I'm assuming it's prepared you, like cutting weight in wrestling has prepared you for the UFC, but is it a little bit different?
Yeah, it's definitely different. So in wrestling, there are two types of weigh-ins. Well, three. Every now and then, like a very rare scenario, you'll get a night before weigh-in. There's like 2 tournaments a year that happens in that are like not folk style tournaments. They're not college tournaments. They're like international ones. Or like national tournaments for freestyle and Greco. And then like 2 hours before. So you weigh in 2 hours before you wrestle, or an hour before. So your recovery period is much, much different. So when I wrestled in college, I was at 174. Now I'm fighting 170. That extra 4 pounds doesn't scare me in the slightest because I can eat and drink whatever I want for 24 hours up until the fight. You weigh in the day before. It's not a big deal. It's definitely a little bit different the way you cut weight in wrestling. I feel like you almost like you cut a little less water and deprive yourself of food a little more. It feels like, because you get to that point where you're like right before weigh-ins and every 10th counts. Whereas in fighting, it's like, I'm only going to be on weight for 30 seconds, And in fighting, weigh-ins are in the afternoon too. A lot of wrestling weigh-ins are in the morning, which means you have to make weight like basically the night before, and then sleep dehydrated, sleep hungry, and then wake up and weigh in. I think making weight for a wrestling match is way more brutal because you're expected to compete right away. And the worst part about it, you got to do it again next week.
Right.
And some days you got to do it tomorrow. And that sucks, is making those 2-day weigh-ins, having multiple weigh-ins in a week, having, you get done weighing in, you get your recovery food in, you compete, you have your like one meal where you're like, this is the meal, I'm going to like eat whatever I want. And then you wake up Sunday morning and it's like, okay, now I'm 11, 12 pounds over again. Now let's restart. And it's just like, and it's that for 4 months. It's like the most grueling season you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. Are you kind of one of those people, like after you have cut weight and stuff, are you still pretty diligent about what you eat, or do you kind of like to I mean, obviously you're gonna balloon up because you're gonna be like rehydrating and stuff, but do you like to kind of indulge in some things, or do you want to stay a little focused still?
A little bit. Yeah. Like I used to be really bad. Like high school, it was always right after I wrestled, it was straight to Culver's. It was the shake, the burger, all of it. And then it was like, I would eat till I could not possibly eat anything else the entire night. And then that was it. And then I had a real shitty week. And through college, I did that a lot too. When I started getting into like my more competitive upperclassmen years, my coaches were really good at dialing that in. It was like, all right, you better be on that scale Monday morning, 10 over, like not a pound over, you pound over, we're going to do some extra work, And that dialed me in a lot. That, and like, you don't have as much freedom, you wrestle, you get on the bus. What you get on the bus was the food that they gave you, the menu that you ordered off of. So it was like, they weren't like Nazis about it or anything. It was like, we'd get good food, but it didn't give you the opportunity to just like binge eat and just destroy yourself with food. Yeah. By the time you got home, it was 3 a.m. from the bus ride. You just go to sleep and wake up. Yeah. I'm definitely better at it than I used to be.
Yeah.
I've got it down pretty good now, but in fighting, it doesn't matter nearly as much. Make weight. Sure, I'll put 20 pounds on because I don't got to fight again until, 3-4 months.
For sure. What's kind of your nutrition like getting, because it's always interesting to me how guys get down to like a specific weight, and sometimes it's crazy weight cut. So what's your fight week kind of like in your diet, and how do you keep everything so strict to make sure?
So this is like new for me now because of like my new diet restrictions. Okay. So like I have to be very, very militant. If like I were to eat gluten like Thursday night, I would be in trouble on Friday.
Lit up.
Yeah. I would have a hard time fighting. I'd have a hard time performing. And so I have to be really, really diligent now with it. Before I took this fight, I was actually supposed to fight in Mexico and in San Carlos, which is the same fight that not Crow Cop, not Rich, Frank Mir, that Frank Mir's daughter is taking her.
Oh, really? That's why. Isn't she like 16 or 17 or something?
I think she's 17. Yeah. Which is probably why San Carlos, Mexico.
Yeah.
So that was the card I was supposed to be on.
Wow.
It was right after I figured out I couldn't eat everything. And I was talking to Benson about it. I was like, I don't know what to do, man. Like what is gluten in Spanish? Like I don't know what to eat when I go there.
That's true.
Yeah. And Benson was like, what I do when I go out of the country is that I go to, whatever the version of Walmart is there. Yeah. And I buy an electric griddle and I cook all my own food the whole week.
For sure. Yeah. There's tons of stories where guys are scared or they're speculating on whether people tamper with their food when they're like in a different country. Like that's scary. I never even thought about that before.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it either. And that's what Benson told me. And I thought about it. I was like, that's what I'm going to have to do. Like, I take that risk and eat something that's going to make my performance bad, especially with the way my diet is now. Typically though, like most fighters do a water load, which I'm kind of doing, not really, but not to the extent that most fighters do, because it's not really as big of a thing in wrestling. In wrestling, it's just like you eat and drink healthy and normal and then cut your water. In fighting, it's like, let's taper the food, load the water so that when we sweat, it comes off really easy, which I've had fighters who've done both that were wrestlers that said they really like the water load. For this one, I think I'm close enough to weight that it's not a big deal. But the big key is staying as hydrated for as long as you can and making sure that your calories count for something. Like you can't have empty calories fight week, just because empty calories add weight but don't add nutrition.
Right.
So I've been on the receiving end of an empty calorie week and then tried to compete where I ate some bullshit because I didn't feel like doing my diet correctly, and then wrestled terribly, where I'm like, oh, I had 500 calories today, but like 300 of them were cookies, I was 20 once, and that was shit that I did every now and then. And I never wrestled well those weeks. Or even worse, like, I had, 1,000 calories, but 100 of them were whiskey. Like, as a young college wrestler, that happens a lot, and it didn't happen to me very often. But you can definitely tell when those empty calories hit, because you feel like shit. And that was my biggest night of like trying to eat healthy. Was second semester Sunday nights. Monday morning, run the track. It was like if I had a slice of pizza on Sunday night, I felt like ass in the morning, and it was hard to get my sprints. So it's super important for me now to just be like borderline militant with what I put in my body fight week.
For sure. Have you ever, this is kind of an odd question, but have you ever like had to go to the bathroom while competing? Like, I feel like I've always wondered, like in the back of my head, like, what if you're in a title fight and you have to go piss or something? Like,
so I've thrown up on the mat. I have never gone to the bathroom on the mat. I've several times though, like, oh my God, I'm up. This match is going on. I'm up next. There's like 3 minutes left. I have to piss now. And you like sprint to the bathroom and you like try and pee as fast as you can and come out. And fighting sucks because your hands are wrapped and you got gloves on. And you're like, wash my hands. How does this work? You like run back. You're like trying to compete. And I'm like a nervous peer too. So like I'll pee like 12, 15 times over the course of like 3 hours while I'm waiting to fight. But I do know a guy who didn't poop on the mat, but he got pooped on the mat. Shout out to Putin, wrestling a dude from Virginia Tech. I don't know that this guy will ever live it down or see the day where he forgets that this happened to him. But in the NCAAs in the round of 16, so the match to get into the match that if you win, you're an All-American. And Virginia Tech silver bullet singlet. It's a really light silver. And Matt was coming around behind him. He was the 174 before I was the 174 at NIU. He was a training partner and like good role model for me as a wrestler. And he's coming from behind and he's got his hand between the legs trying to finish and pulls his arm up. And there's just like runny, just got mud dumped on him. And the ref calls it, and it smelled really bad too. I wasn't there, but from what I was told, it was a horrendous stench. And they made him go to the bathroom. Like, you have to go clean yourself up. They hit him with his injury time, which is 5 minutes. And he comes running back, and he's still just covered in mess. And they disqualified him from the tournament, and Matt won.
My
God. And
That
every heavyweight
is crazy.
that's poop, and our heavyweight comes running down the stairs. Runs past the security guard and yells down, "What just happened? Do what I think happened just happen?" And they're shaking their head, yeah. And then he yells, "This is the greatest day of my life."
Oh my, that is correct.
I can't imagine having to live that down.
No, that is crazy because I've never heard anything like that. But like, like marathon runners or whatever, when they're running and they run through it, I've seen videos of that too. That's brutal.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I've never been in that stressful of a situation. I know people who have, but yeah, I am very blessed to have not had to have that happen to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's something else. But so like, in terms of your like, because you have an amateur career and now you're gonna have your first pro fight coming up on Friday, right? So how do you decipher whether you're ready or not, and whether you can make that leap? Like, do you like talk with your coaches, or is it kind of just like a feeling you have where you're like, I'm ready to go?
A little bit of both. So if you don't have that feeling where you're like, I'm ready to go, then you definitely shouldn't be taking a pro fight.
Probably, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So that was, I'm sure there were plenty of people who would have told me to take a pro fight before I was ready. You know, plenty of gyms, especially smaller gyms, where they would have loved the opportunity to have like brought me into the cage for a pro fight before I was actually ready. And, you know, I've had opportunities that I've turned down, like fairly big ones. So Bellator does like this thing where they have their contracted fighters and then they bring local fighters onto a card to keep costs down, you know?
Yeah.
And I had one of those opportunities where I could have fought in Bellator like a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it seemed like it was happening way too fast. And I sat down.
Would you be fighting like a guy more like on your level, or are they going to throw you against a Bellator guy?
They wanted me to fight Romero Cotton, who was a 3-time Division II national champ in wrestling and had already had like 5 pro fights.
Oh, dang.
And at 185. So it was
wow, yeah.
all around wasn't a good idea for me. At the time, I really could have, it was like right before I was going to move to the lab. And I sat down with my coach at home and we talked about it. It was like, no, it was a huge risk, and it would have been really dumb to start my pro career out on such a giant risk. You know, you take a loss right away in your pro career and that follows you forever. Whereas like you lose in your amateur career, who cares? It doesn't follow you anywhere. It gets erased once you go pro.
Right.
But really when you really know you need to go pro is when you just stop getting amateur fights. And that's where I was, where I had been on a list to get an amateur fight for like 3-4 months and nobody was calling. The people who called would call me back, you know, a day later, like, oh, we can't do it. The guy backed out, this and that. And that was basically it. And I was sitting next to Coach Crouch at practice one day and I was just like, let's do it. Like, I'm ready. I want to fight. It's been a while. Like, I'm ready. I'll do a pro fight. And he was like, all right, let's make it happen. I think you're ready. And then that's the conversation you got to have. Like, you need to have the conversation first with yourself and then with your coach. And people think it's like this big deal. Like, oh, he's going pro. It's literally just like a phone call. Like, hey, find me a pro fight. You know, it's not like Tony Hawk. That's where I stole that from, was because Tony Hawk went pro when he was like 14 and everybody like always asked him like, oh, that's so crazy. He was like, no, I went to a tournament and there was a piece of paper that said amateur and said pro, and I checked the pro box. That was all that happened. And that's kind of what happens in MMA too. Like there's no cake, you know, there's no party, no streamers, nothing like that. It's just, it's time for a pro fight. I shouldn't be fighting amateur anymore. I'm ready to get paid for this.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're when you're preparing for your amateur fights, how much of it is focusing on yourself and how much of it is actually like focusing on your opponent? Because you know what I mean? Because I feel like you're still in that like progression stage if you're still an amateur, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier where I said I don't prefer to sit around and make a monster out of my opponent. I'd rather sit around and make a monster out of myself. And that's still how I am. It was how I was with wrestling too. I don't want to sit around and overanalyze the guy I'm fighting, because at the end of the day, what wins and loses the fight is what I do, right? It has very little to do with your opponent. By the time fight time comes, you've already won or lost. Mm-hmm. You've either prepared correctly and you have the talent and the mindset to win, or you don't. And I think that's how I've always thought. Now, do I want to know what to expect? Yeah. Like, I want to know if he's got in a wrestling match, is like, if he has a really good left-handed high crotch, left-handed headlock, or something specific, I want to know that. And I want to think about those things and maybe train to gear myself a little bit to them as well. But the end of the day, like, I firmly believe in the power of me, and what I do is going to be the difference maker. Sitting around thinking about what my opponent does well feels like mentally very limiting to think that. So you have to there's a point of diminishing returns where thinking about your opponent is stealing space from thinking about yourself. And I like to live in that realm where I'm thinking about myself and what I can do to be the best fighter, best competitor, best athlete that I can possibly be, and spend less time thinking about what my opponent's doing.
Yeah. Do you ever, that's completely true. Do you ever find it difficult, especially like, do you ever find it difficult finding film on your guys? Like if you ever want to cause like, is that kind of hard studying guys that might not have the most recognition yet?
Yeah, for sure. Especially for amateur fights. A lot of grainy cell phone videos. That's like one of the first places I go to find video on an opponent is Facebook. I go right to their Facebook. There's probably a video on there that somebody took while they were at the fight, and you're listening to like two screaming drunk dudes and holding their iPhone up, and you're looking at it through the fence. That's the majority of the videos you see, especially at amateurs, is those videos that just got posted to Facebook. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm not, knowing that doesn't stop me from A, posting videos of myself, or B, letting people tag me in those videos. You know, I believe in myself enough that if they watch a video of me taking someone down in the first 7 seconds of a fight, I don't think it's going to make a difference. You don't have a lifetime to practice that. Like, they're not going to be as good at wrestling as I am for the most part. Now, obviously, as you progress in your career, you're going to run into more guys that are like that. But where I am right now, I mean, all of my fights that you can find online are videos of me taking people down within the first 15 seconds of the fight. So it's like, I feel the same way about it. You know, it is difficult, but everybody's got a guy. Like, I got a guy I can message and be like, tell me about this guy. And he'll message me an hour later with his resume and, you know, here's what he's good at. Here's what he's bad at. He's fought this dude, this dude, this dude. You have a common opponent here. You know, everybody's got their guy behind the laptop, you know, and they definitely help a lot, but it's not like a major part of my camp.
For sure. Was your, cause it's the Caged Aggression is in Iowa, correct? Was traveling and everything. What was traveling like airplane wise? And like, what are the protocols for like the, regarding COVID for the fight aggression, like, promotion?
So, traveling wasn't so bad. I've been doing a lot of flying lately, so I was pretty already ready for that. Today actually sucked. I got to the airport it sucked in terms of how long it took me to get here because I had a connecting flight. But I tapered my training so that today could be an off day. I was expecting it to be an off day, right? I didn't plan to have a ton of work today anyway, so not a huge deal. I got to the airport at 7:45 this morning. I got to my parents' house, my parents are an hour away from where I'm fighting at. So
that's awesome.
I'm there right now. Yeah. So I got here at like 8. So I was out and about for like, 10 hours because of the time change. But we're all going to get COVID tested when we get there. That's how the strict one is, like the UFC, you know, like Coach Crouch is getting nose swabbed every other weekend right now. That stuff's rough.
Is he with Cannoneer?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So he leaves Wednesday. Wednesday. Yeah.
Oh, so is he in Vegas right now? Like the quarantine thing?
I think they leave for Vegas Wednesday.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So they get tested in Vegas when they get there, and then they get tested again before they get on the plane.
Then they fly out.
Then they fly out. Then they get tested when they get there, basically, and then they quarantine there, and then they get tested again before they fight.
It's brutal. Just watching like the UFC embedded stuff, it's like, geez, man, like you're just chilling in your hotel room, like it's insane.
Yeah,
but that's awesome. So like last thing, I don't want to keep you long. Thank you so much for doing this. This is so cool.
No problem.
Do you want to kind of go through your teammate and his upcoming fight with Robert Whitaker, which is has massive implications in the middleweight division? Do you want to kind of go through that? Obviously, you're going to root for your boy, but like, how do you kind of see that fight going?
I think Jared is a tough. I think out of everybody that's in the top 5 at that weight, I think Jared's the bad matchup for all of them. He hits incredibly hard. He's a heavyweight. He still throws heavyweight hands, and his ability to pick out angles up close is pretty pretty impressive. I've been on the receiving end of it a few times.
Yeah.
His wrestling's only getting better. Did a lot of studying tape on Whitaker for this fight and watching Whitaker's wrestling. And I think Jared's wrestling matches up just fine with them. I think Jared matches up really well with them. I think Jared matches up well with Izzy. Jared's been on standby to fight Izzy before, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if Jared goes in there and fights the way I know he can, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Whitaker's a tough son of a bitch.
Yeah, he is, but he gets hit a lot.
Yeah, and it's tough because it's like a good guy fight.
Right, I know. That's the tough thing. For sure.
Is they're both likable dudes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you don't want either of them to lose. Obviously, I really, really want Jared to win, and I want Robert to lose. It'd mean a ton for me if Jared got this win and I got to see him fight Israel Adesanya. That would I can't imagine. It'd be the best thing I've been a part of in my life, maybe, you know. And Jared's just super talented, man. I don't think there's anybody at that weight who's the athlete that he is. He's the best athlete at 185 by far, 100%. I think. Yeah. More of an athlete than Paulo Costa, more of an athlete than any of them. I think Jared works over Paulo Costa. I think Jared.
What did you think of that fight?
It went how I thought it was gonna. You know, he's not that. I don't think he's that impressive. Obviously, he's a great fighter. He's in the top 5 in the UFC, but
I thought he was a little too overconfident after his Romero fight. I was like, bro, you're acting like you walked through him. You didn't. I honestly thought he lost. So I mean, like,
yeah, exactly. And I felt the same way. And the way I feel about Jared and Izzy is that I think if Jared touches Israel Adesanya as much as Kelvin did, going to be a different story. If he can get in on him as much as Kelvin did, it's going to be a not fun night for Izzy. Mm-hmm. And I think that about Robert Whitaker too. I think if Jared touches Robert Whitaker as much as Yoel did, going to be problems, man. He doesn't hit like an 85er. He doesn't hit like a 205. He hits like a heavyweight. And that heavyweight strength, and he's got dad strength. That man is carrying children around all day. He is a monster. I think he puts his hands on Robert Whitaker, and it's a tough night for him. I really think he's going to get it done. I'm super excited for him. He's had an awesome camp. I don't really ever see Jared have a bad camp. He's so in tune with his body and so in tune with his training and picks up on things so fast. The way he picks up on wrestling has been very, very quick since I've been there. I just from where he was when I got there to where he is now, and I'm not gonna sit and try and take credit for anything, but just the feeling of him wrestling me now, he's definitely more talented wrestler, and you can tell that it's been a big part of his camp. And I don't want to give away anything, but Jared's gonna be tough to take down, even with Whitaker's good wrestling. Jared has a way of making people want to wrestle him. You know,
well, yeah, I wouldn't want to stand with that guy either.
Yeah, and I think we're ready for anything Robert Whitaker can bring.
100%. What do you think about the main event?
This is the fight card of the millennia.
No, but I want to know who's gonna fight. Is Islam Makhachev? Is that fight off because RDA got COVID? Because I was digging that fight. I was like, let's go.
If Michael Chandler gets brought in for that fight, I think that's the move, marketing wise. It's maybe the best card ever. It could shape up to be one of the best cards. Definitely card of the year. Definitely card of the year contender.
Because Walt Harris is fighting Alexander Volkov on there.
Yeah, that's a good fight too.
Yeah.
But if anybody can beat Khabib, it's Justin Gaethje.
Honestly, you feel that way 100%.
And I'm a big Khabib fanboy. I was a Khabib fanboy before Conor. You know, I remember that actually when I fought in Mexico was the night before that fight. So I watched that fight with a bunch of fighters in Mexico, and everybody was riding Conor. And I was like, he's going to maul him. He's going to maul him. It's going to be a finish for sure. Everybody thought I was crazy. He's on another level there, but Justin Gaethje I don't think he's ever been taken down. you know?
Yeah. No one's ever tested it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's extremely hard to take down. And I think he's the better striker for sure. If he gets in close and lands like he did on Tony, I don't think, Habib's never been in a fight like that, you know? So I'm really excited for it, man. I'm rooting, my first time rooting against Habib, just because I like Gaethje so much, and I won't root against America for the most part. I think it's just gonna be a great card. I'm all around excited for it. Casey Kenny's on it now too. There's another one of his teammates. Yeah, he's fighting Nathaniel Wood. After that turnaround.
Oh dang, dude! Nathaniel Wood's a baller, but that's gonna be a good one. That's awesome.
Yeah, after Casey barbecued Alatang's ribs the other weekend, just absolutely had a barbecue on him. Just like, just the redness and swelling on that dude's ribs after 15 minutes with Casey Kenny is insane. And Casey is a fighter, man. He loves to fight. I got to watch that dude sign for like a short notice fight. I walked in the locker room, it was just me and him, and he put his phone down. He started jumping up and down. And I was like, what is going on? He goes, I just signed. I'm fighting in like 9 days.
That's sick.
Just when I sign like that, especially a short notice fight, I'm excited, but not the way Casey Kenny is excited. Casey, it's like watching the mailman walk through the door and your dog is flipping out. That was what it was like watching Casey get excited for a short notice fight. So that dude loves to fight, man. And I'm excited I'm equally excited for that fight as I am for the rest of the card, because Nathaniel Wood is tough, and I think it's a great matchup for Casey, and it's going to be an awesome fight.
Like, how motivating is it for you to be around all these guys getting such like awesome opportunities, and like one day knowing that you're going to be at that stage? Like, how cool is that? Oh
yeah. Like getting to ride along with that, like Kyler Phillips. He's another one in our camp that, walked through the mud for a little while and probably should have been in the UFC a little earlier than he was. And watching him just shine, in the UFC is like super motivating, where I'm like, gosh, I'm right there with them. I'm going to be there someday.
Exactly.
And I get to follow in their footsteps, and they're all great examples for me, and they're all great examples for everyone on the team. And it's just like, you're in good company. You're going to be there too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for doing this. This is so cool. You're awesome. I wish you nothing but the best of luck on Friday. Like, do you want to plug your fight and also I wanted to mention, it's pretty sick how the pay-per-view goes to like you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's really cool.
I've had fights where they don't do that. This one's really cool. They're doing that. So you're going to want to go to cagedaggression.tv and select me as your fighter and check the pay-per-view out on Friday night. There's going to be a ton of great fights.
That is awesome. Thank you so much again. I know it's been a long day of travel. Thank you so much. This is so cool. No problem, and hopefully maybe have you on again sometime. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always down, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much and good luck.
Yep. Thank you. Take it easy, brother.